We talk a lot about pure data and stats, objective things on this show. But what about pure raw emotion? That is going to be the category of today's show, as I'm going to talk with Javier Reyes from Locked On Padres about the most hated players in recent memory on both the Giants and the Padres.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, usually, maybe not today, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already. And please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And where we get started is just simply introducing the topic of today's show, which is that Javier Reyes, I'm a frequent guest of his podcast, and this is no exception. We just have a lot of fun talking about some of the more disliked players on the Padres and Giants since we've been hosting the show. For me, it's been 5 years, so I've got a lot of options to choose from. And we elaborate on the stories and the reasons why behind each guy, and so it's a lot of fun. It may even be a two-part conversation because we went real long when we were recording. So without further delay, here it is. The most hated Giants and Padres in recent memory that we could come up with for the show.
On today's very special episode of not just the Locked On Padres podcast, but also the Locked On Giants podcast, we are letting the hate flow on today's episode, talking about some of the players that we've noticed that both of our teams have had over the years since we've been hosting that really aren't liked at all by our own fan bases, and probably more so for my team. But even still, I wanted to do a crossover because people seem to have a whole ball of laughs when I did this with my buddy Miller Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks last week. But we are doing it Giants style. And because last week I talked about Diamondbacks players I didn't like. Now we're going to talk about Padres, which should be a lot of fun, and I imagine people already know who I'm going to say. But I've been talking too long already. Let me introduce my co-host, Mr. Ben Kaspick. As always, he's been on the pod 27,000 times, which is probably why I waited a second to introduce you. People already know. You know what I mean? They're like, that's our guy.
Yeah.
That's our guy who brings the numbers that we get mad at every now and then. And then we listen to him and we're like, oh, yeah, I guess that's a good point. It's Ben Kaspick. Sir, how you doing?
I'm good. And today it's probably not going to be so much about numbers. And sometimes some of my listeners, they're clamoring for that a little bit. Sometimes they don't want the data. They want maybe just to let the hate flow. And I think we're going to let that happen. And this has been a very interesting offseason for the Giants in terms of maybe they've traded away some guys who people didn't like kind of on purpose because they didn't perform, but also they were not popular because they didn't perform. So I'm looking forward to just diving in because I think you may be surprised. There are a lot of players that Giants fans get upset about. So,
oh yeah, I can't wait, man. And I think one thing we're going to do to differentiate from at least my listeners what we did last week. Again, I'm going to be talking about Padres players. Ben we're not doing each other's, but I do think that we should take a guess before each one of us makes a pick. I think that'll be a little bit of fun. So strap in, folks. The hate is here. We're both Anakin Skywalker out here. Let's do this. Oh, I left the coin. Miller and I usually we flip a coin to determine who goes first. But since I came up with this idea, I may as well go first and talk about, in my opinion, the players that I've noticed over the years have just seemed to be the most hated. And some of them not as much for me. And we're going to start with a little bit of a light one. because I know everyone is expecting a certain player to be named. He's blocked my Padres account on Twitter, which is incredible. But first, we're going to talk about one to do a little bit of a throwback, and I don't have any ill will towards him, but it is Craig Stammen. Stampeding Stammen is what I nicknamed him a few years ago because he ran out of that bullpen looking like he was, Braveheart about to take on the world. And folks, he was not Braveheart. Here's the thing with Craig Stammen. I think mostly it comes down to being a relief pitcher that just blew up in the worst possible times. He would give up runs for sure. He wasn't that great of a relief pitcher, but for me, in my experience, this was like the number one guy every single time, Ben. He was called it. All of my Twitter feed, and even occasionally on the broadcast, they'd be like, hey, Stammen has been, not the most trustworthy reliever lately. And I think part of it was because he got paid a decent amount by the Padres. Not a lot, don't get me wrong, but he was brought in 2 years, 4.5 isn't a lot initially, but then the 2 years, $9 million. It just frustrated people a little bit that this guy came in and was basically just always giving up leads. It almost looked like his confidence evaporated immediately. And I felt bad. Definitely not an awful player. He had one good season back in 2018 with the Padres, and then he fell off a cliff. Basically soon after that, delivering a 5.63 ERA one year, a 3.06, which wasn't that bad. I don't think he was that bad, but it is because of the circumstance and the times he blew up. It's like, imagine if Camilo Duvall only was bad in like 4-run leads, and it happened multiple times. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't just like, oh yeah, they brought him in the 8th, he gave up 1 run, didn't blow the save, but it was just always, it would be a disaster. And that's what I felt bad, because Craig Stammen wasn't really that bad, but that's my first one.
That's funny. It's just so funny to me that like the perspective of a fan base can be so much different than the perspective of another fan base about a certain player who's on that team. Because I think of Stammen and I think of like kind of staple of the Padres bullpen and like someone who's good. And it's just funny because, I bet you that some of mine might surprise you too. But the first one, the one that just kind of jumps off the page.
Can I guess?
Sure.
I guess. Let's do the guess. I forgot to let you guess for mine.
Yeah. I wouldn't have guessed Stammen. So
no. Yeah, I know. But I'll have some fun ones upcoming. But Jeff Samardzija.
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, he makes the list for me.
Okay.
I think that's an interesting one because I think a lot of people like kind of actually liked him because he had like one season where he was pretty good, but it was like a 5-year contract and the rest of them were not.
Yeah.
And Giants fans, like, basically at that time, it was like shortly after the championships. But yeah, I mean, what bothered me about Jeff Samardzija was, first of all, like, he just kind of had an attitude all the time. And he would like literally turn red with anger and like give up homers and just turn red with rage. And it just, like, I was mad. He was mad, and it was just like everybody's mad, and so it just he didn't just shrug it off. Like, you could tell he wore it on. Literally, like, his face would get flushed with he can't help it, but
he was absolutely a guy. You know what I mean? In every sense of the word, he was the muscle meathead vibes to him for sure. But
totally,
at one point in time, he was like the not most coveted, but he was like in trade rumors all the time because he was on the Cubs, I believe it was, and they were still rebuilding. So everyone was excited. He went to the White Sox and was a mess. And then, like you said, I think had like a quick okay season with the Giants and then fell off, and that was kind of it. Let's talk about FanDuel really quickly, guys. You know what's up. Super Bowl is over, but sports are not over. Hey, look, there's going to be baseball futures coming out soon. I don't think that they're out yet on FanDuel, but look for that. No, I don't know why the thumbs up just appeared next to me. That's been happening lately. And 2,
I can tell you why.
Oh, really? There we go. Yeah. But there's also hoops. We got March Madness coming up. Maybe you bet on INSQ versus Curry last week. Whatever. They've got you covered over at FanDuel because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 buckaroos if you win, if your bet wins, I should say. So check it out. You got nothing to lose. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and much more. Over unders, the the certain stats. If we're talking about basketball, you want to bet over on assists. Tyus Jones is an interesting little sleeper for all you gambling folks out there, because he low-key racks up like 9 assists every night. How do I know this? Because I haven't been fantasy basketball and I stink this year, but at least I have Tyus Jones. So go check that out, guys, over at FanDuel. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. Official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the beginning of the end when when the Giants like signed him and Johnny Cueto, and at first they were good. This was going into 2016. Oh my gosh, you just sparked my memory. And one of the most maligned players for the Giants. It wasn't going to be my first one, but I'll go with it now because it reminds me, Mark Melancon.
Yes.
And that I was wondering if that might surprise you, because it almost surprises me, because if you actually look at the numbers, he was never really that bad from like a run prevention standpoint, but he was just never a reliable closer. And they signed him at a time when they were coming off a season that was like blown up because of their bullpen. They just utterly like you could not collapse more than they collapsed bullpen wise in the last like 2 months or 3 months of the season. Yet they made the playoffs anyway, just barely. And then their bullpen blew a 3-run 9th inning lead in the playoffs against the Cubs. Oof. And I was there.
Oh no.
And it was like 5 relievers and then nobody could get an out. And then they lost, and then that was the game that clinched the series. And if they had won, it would have gone to a decisive Game 5 in Chicago with Cueto, who was having his good one and only great year with the Giants, lined up to pitch. And so anyway, that's all the context that they then go out and sign Mark Melancon to like be the answer and like resolve their bullpen woes. Opening day the next season in Arizona, I think he gets the first 2 outs of the inning.
I think I remember this too.
I think he gets the first 2 outs of the inning.
Yeah.
And then he gives up like 4 consecutive hits and blows the save. And that was 2017. A year they went on to lose 98 games, coming off a year in which they made the playoffs, won a wild card game, won the wild card game. So that was like the beginning of the Giant. That was the beginning of the end of the run of success that they had. And Mark Melancon, just like from day one when he blew opening day, dude, Madison Bumgarner pitched amazing in that game. He hit 2 home runs in that game.
Yes, I do remember this. Yes.
Your pitcher goes like 7 dominant. He has like 12 strikeouts and he hit 2 homers. And then in comes your savior closer, and he blows this game. And it was just like that. And it wasn't just that. He continued to just not be reliable.
Absolutely.
And then he went elsewhere and ended up having success.
2 things.
Also, they traded him and got, by the way, Giants fans may not even know this because it was so long ago. In 2019, they traded him and got Tristan Beck, who had a nice year last year with the Giants and figures to be a big part of their pitching staff this year. So it turned out maybe that Melancon yielded something positive ultimately.
Yeah, he salvaged it a little bit. That's all we could ask for sometimes.
Yeah, took a while, but
yeah, it was a very delayed, delayed salvage. 2 things. Number 1, I swear there's nothing more frustrating than a bad bullpen. You're just like, you got to be kidding me. You guys can't throw 1 inning. You can't get 1 out, like 3 individual guys, of course, not as a whole. Like, you can't bring me this reliever that can't just at least not give up 4 home runs or whatever. It is maddening. And number 2, Miller Thomas, again, who I'm bringing up. That's my guy, obviously, because I've cited him like 5 times on here. But we were doing most hated. He was choosing most hated Padres. One of the first ones he brought up was Mark Melancon. Why? Because as soon as he went to the Diamondbacks, he was a disaster and blew all their games. So Mark Melancon is just a favorite of one team in the NL West and is a hated nemesis of 2, let me tell you, with the Giants, who this was earlier on too. This, at least with the D-backs, you can be like, nah, he's old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe we should have expected that was his last ounce was with the Padres. With the Giants, it's like, No, he was young. He was.
They gave him a big contract. It was
Yeah.
like Aroldis Chapman. I forget the other guy. There was Kenley Jansen. Maybe like there was just good relievers. That
Trevor
was like
Rosenthal.
the
Yeah.
strength of that free agent class, and he was one of the big closers. And it was just it. I want to say it was a disaster, but if you look at the ERAs and stuff, it's not like
The
like he
first
was in
year,
the sixes.
4.5. Yeah, first year 4.5 isn't great.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, it's not, and
and then the
especially
next year
because like
3.23. Yeah.
yeah, we should move on from Melancon. I think Giants fans' blood pressure got raised just thinking about the Melancon era. We're very blessed, let me tell you, to have the Camilo Doval era right now because that guy's a dragon out there on the
Absolutely,
mound.
man. Yeah, he's awesome. And now it's my turn. We've talked about Mark Melancon and Craig Stammen, two relievers. Ben, would you like to make another guess as to a player that I feel has been quite hated while I've been host of this Locked On Padres podcast?
I mean, we all know the obvious one, so I'm not even going to say it.
I'll
But
save him for last. Yeah.
yeah, I want to say. Oh, I got a good one.
You got a good one?
Austin Nola. How about that?
Yeah. Austin Nola. It's funny because in my experience, this one was also a hate for me because I was such a Luis Campusano truther. For a while, I feel like since I started talking to you, you knew who Luis Campusano was.
Yes, I did. You
He's
were
been
talking
such a
about
thing
him
for
from
so
day
long.
one.
And last year he finally broke out, but it was so frustrating that Austin Nola for basically 2 years at the time, as in this past season, had been not good defensively and couldn't hit at all. So I was like, okay. I remember at one point I was like, all right, maybe he's a good defender. Like Austin Hedges once upon a time. Good defensive player. That's why they kept him in line. Okay. I was a little bit of a Francisco Mejia guy, but even still, I was like, okay, this is understandable. Austin Nola wasn't good at anything. And actively, Campusano, he'd have 2 hits and then bench the next day. And Nola would come up, wouldn't hit the ball hard, he would walk okay, and he wouldn't chase anything, but it doesn't matter if you can't get the ball out of the infield. So that was the issue there. He was heinous. I think actively cost the Padres a game last year if you go by Fangraphs. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to Google that really quickly because it was a miserable experience. In 2022 with the Padres, he had a 0.2 F4. Year after that, -1. So that's what we were dealing with at starting catcher. And you gave up Ty France, Andres Muniz for him.
I was going to say that's the kicker right there.
Yeah,
you gave up 2. I mean, Munoz is like. I mean, he was even at the time before he was maybe hurt at the time.
Yeah, I think he was a little bit banged up, but even still.
But
the fact
now
that you gave
he's
that dude who throws gas, right?
He's
like all the
nasty.
time. And Ty France, he had a down year, but there's a multiverse out there where the Padres don't have Cronenworth extended. They just have him at second, and they've got Ty France at first. And yeah, maybe they extended Machado. They still do Tatis. And then they kept all that money, retooled it elsewhere. We're just chilling with Cronenworth and Ty France right now. But
yeah,
what can I say?
Instead, you got Austin Nola.
Yep. Instead, we got Austin Nola. I think it's the trade and his poor performance. The only thing that doesn't make him like the top or even in the top tier is finding out the eye issue that he had, which recontextualizes his bad season. I would blame the Padres and management for being like, how do you not? I just don't understand how teams don't figure this out at some point. So that does explain maybe why he was so bad. But yeah, Austin Nola was driving people a little bit nuts with how poorly he played.
Is it my turn?
Yes, and I want to guess because I got it.
Do you?
It's a lock. I think it's a lock.
I don't know. This is kind of like it's in some ways it's like it's very Giants Padres.
Yeah.
And in other ways it's kind of like niche. So
okay.
Let's hear what you got.
Well, I don't know if it's Padres, but my guess was Hunter Strickland.
Oh, he is definitely on the list for sure. For sure. I don't go to that many games, but I was at the game when he drilled Bryce Harper and Harper charged the mound and Hunter Strickland. He had to be like carried off the field by his own teammates.
Must have been thrilling to witness, though.
It was just ugly because again, that was 2017 when they were just bad, and it was. And speaking of Jeff Samardzija, he came out ripping and roaring, trying to like tackle Bryce Harper, and he ended up running into Mike Morse and hitting him in the head and ending his career.
Right. I forgot about that. Yes.
And
Jeff
so,
Samardzija, man. My God.
yeah, he was like charging at Harper and ended up hitting his own teammate in the head. And yeah, in Strickland, he had to be like carried off the field. Like one leg was like in the air. It was just embarrassing. And also he just wasn't like the stuff you would hope would translate to being good, but it just didn't. And he's still bouncing around. But he's definitely on the list. But my other guy is actually like similar in a lot of ways. He's a reliever with like kind of a temper, and or at least it seemed that way. But this is the thing, we've probably talked about it close to 10 times on the show, or at least I have. Bring it up all the time. It's one of my in 5 years hosting this show, it is one of the worst games I've ever experienced. And it was against the Padres, with the Padres as the home team in San Francisco.
I know exactly.
Trent Grisham hits a walk-off homer against, I had to even look up, Sam Coonrod. Sam Coonrod, okay? This was like, he was only on the team for a brief minute, but like in that brief minute, like that moment, a lot of people maybe didn't follow 2020 baseball super closely, but if you were into that year and just, yeah, I mean, I was as much as any time, because it was like a relief to get away from the reality of what the world was going through, to be able to watch the Giants play. And they were they were like in position to make the playoffs.
Yes,
and then they
absolutely.
played the Padres for a 4-game series to end that 60-game season. And I think the Giants won the first game. At least they won the first. It was a doubleheader, I think, and they won the first game of a doubleheader. And then they were about to win the second game of the doubleheader. And Sam Coonrod, he like couldn't throw strikes. He like led off the inning by walking somebody, I believe, and ended up having like 2 on with 1 out and Grisham up. And Giants are in San Francisco, but the craziness of that season, like, I don't even remember, it was because of like smoke in Seattle, or it was because Alex Dickerson had a false positive COVID test in San Diego. Yeah. So whatever the reason, the Padres were the home team, and Coonrod gave up a walk-off, and that the Giants missed the playoffs by virtue of a tie. They tied the Brewers, and whatever the tiebreaker rules were, like if they had one more win, and that was the bottom of the ninth, even though it was in San Francisco and the Padres were up. And that, you laugh, but man, that was one of the worst. I mean, it ruined their season, even though it was a 60-game season. But if you're a hardcore baseball fan, like I was into that season, like it was a season. But beyond that, he was disliked for other things. Like, he was the only Giants player. There was like this like kneeling in solidarity, George Floyd kind of thing on opening day, and he was the only player who refused to kneel. In solidarity, and he stood, and it's just, it didn't go over well with people here.
No, I imagine.
And he said like he only kneels before.
I remember this. Clay Thompson was in his Instagram comments. I remember this being a thing. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah. So
Clay Thompson was cursing about just Clay Thompson. Like, I don't know what he's doing. He's just hanging out. He's like, I'm bored. I'm just gonna start flaming people on Instagram.
Flaming a Giants player.
Yeah, I know. That's what made it even funnier.
And so they got rid of him. I think they got rid of him that offseason, right after the 2020 season, when that disastrous Trent Grisham home run at the end of the year happened. So
it's just your evil ghost.
Trent Grisham, this is one of those guys, like, he's the anti-Mark Melancon, where like you look at his numbers and they're bad.
Yeah.
At least his hitting numbers. But then whenever he's up, like, he is so dangerous to, like, as a Giants fan, you're like, this guy is gonna hit a walk-off at Oracle Park. Like,
It's just, that's what happens. It's like me with Chris Taylor of the Dodgers, where I'm just like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Now, granted,
Yeah.
I don't even think the Dodgers have any more minor players that I could even point to be like,
True.
yeah, that guy is weird. He shouldn't hit the walk-off here because that's their whole team now. But alas, everybody's the point. Look, I remember that. And hey, at least you were gifted with the most inexplicably good season in the history of baseball the year after with the Giants. Inexplicable. I forgot
That's true.
who wrote recently. Someone wrote an article recently where we're like, it still makes no sense.
Yeah, I saw that.
It was so funny. It's like no one can explain it. And that's the beauty of sports, ladies and gentlemen. But here's something that I can explain. What I can't explain is that people really like to get their tickets and they like to get them on time for the best prices. And you know who can help you out with that? That is Game Time, ladies and gentlemen. We love Game Time here at the Locked On Podcast Network. And let me tell you, look, here's the thing. If it's the day of, it's the last second, you want to be able to get tickets for decent prices. Game Time has you covered, and they pay you back if you find a better seat in the zone. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about, oh man, what if there's a better seat that's available? Don't worry. You kind of just like you reserve and then you hunt and find and they have you covered. They also give you like seat views to show you what exactly the seat looks like that you're purchasing. And it's not just sports, concerts, probably not like some of the big ones. Taylor Swift, is she still on tour? I don't even know. But Game Time helps you out, man. Game Time can help you out for all sorts of things. Concerts, theater, comedy shows, whatever you want. They got you covered. Last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. They're easy to find. Views from all seats. Lowest prices guaranteed. Event cancellation protection. Job loss protection. And much, much more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON. That's right here. I don't know how many times I have to tell the listeners and viewers, Ben. Like, we just give you free things just for listening to this pod.
I know.
Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Check that out.
No
Check
brainer.
that out. So even if you hate us today and hate the players we're bringing up, we got you for $20 off.
$20.
Just like that. Terms apply.
You're
Again,
going anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Create an account and redeem Locked On, spelled exactly how you would think, for $20 off. Game Time, last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Go check it out. Ben, let's go a little bit faster now because we got a lot of hate. I feel it. I feel the hate still flowing through. So can you guess my next one?
Will Myers.
No, Will Myers is on the most beloved list.
Okay, all right.
That's weird, but to me, he has to do with the obvious one, and that's why Will Myers became beloved by Padres fans.
Okay.
I think that's why. So we're gonna save him for last. But the next one I want to bring up really quickly, just because I brought it up last week.
Yeah,
Tommy Pham. Tommy Pham is hilarious. First of all, I think he's hilarious, and it's not because he's trying to be funny. And I'm not trying to make light of any like personal problems he has, but he hits like 700 against the Padres, and he was really bad with them. And I think a lot of Padres fans started not liking him because the 2021 collapse, he was one of the least clutch players in the entire league. Go look up his numbers in running scoring position. I believe it was him and Grisham were in the bottom 5, both somehow. I actually think Grisham was actually not as bad that year, but Pham was awful, right? And it was annoying because it's like, all we need you to do is get on base and steal bases sometimes. Like, how this isn't that hard. But Pham wasn't good there. He had a collision with Ha-Seong Kim, and
it was against the Giants.
It was against the Giants. There was like a weird, he was just upset vibe, and it's like he wasn't even checking on Kim. Again, that might be personal stuff, maybe some anger stuff. Everyone knows about the Jock Peterson situation.
I was going to say, slap Jock Peterson in the face.
Exactly. So that's one for sure. But then the Ha-Seong Kim collision combined with the choke stuff, he just had a bad vibe, I think. Yeah. And when everyone was trying to celebrate, slam Diego and everything, just had a bad vibe. Wish him nothing but the best, though. I don't hate him as much as other people, but I do find the fact that he hit a third deck home run against the Padres when he was on the Reds. I was like, we could literally be superheroes and he'd find a way to beat us because they're the Padres. So that's one for me. With you, this is tough because I feel like all the obvious ones are out. So I'm going to throw out a little bit of a random one. I'm going to go with, see if I can find him really quickly. I'm going to go and try and guess. What do we think of Joe Panic?
Oh, beloved.
Okay.
Beloved. He was integral in coming up as a rookie in 2014 and helping them win the World Series. And you just never can lose the love after something like that. And that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers tomorrow. I think we're going to be airing part 2. I haven't yet decided if I'm cutting this or not, but there was so much to get into that I think it is going to be cut. If you heard the whole thing, then we went a little bit long, and we'll update you on the latest from spring training. The Boris 4, any rumors there? Are the Giants in? Are they not in? Are these on these guys? And we've also got a bunch of mailbag questions that are really pertinent and relevant. So all of that coming up throughout the week, possibly tomorrow. So once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like the show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much. So thank you. Thank you in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Today, you are now Locked On Giants.